What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Next Gen Sales Leader Podcast. My name is Benjamin Reed. I'm here with Kristie Jones, the author of Selling Your Way In. Go check out the book. She's a sales consultant and a SaaS B2B advisor for B2B founders. So welcome to the show, Kristie.
Benjamin, thanks so much for having me on. I'm very transparent in saying I would not have gotten into SaaS had I not been terminated from a prior experience. I fell my way into the SaaS situation. Back in 2000. So I had a retail background prior to that. I worked for a major department store. I guess being fired actually isn't the actual truth. I left on my own accord, but there were differences in philosophical differences that was coming down the pike. So I decided that Fortune 500 business was no longer for me, and had a nice opportunity to work for, at that point, a bootstrapped company, now PE backed, for an owner founder who had parted ways with his co-founder. So when I got there, it was about $1 million in revenue. 10 years later, it was $10 million in revenue. And that's how my SaaS journey began. I say I'm so old that it wasn't SaaS back then, it was subscription model. So I have seen the entire SaaS journey and really never thought technology or software was going to be my passion and my love, but I fell in love with the pace. I think that's one of the things I did enjoy about retail is every day was a new day and you had to be on your feet and think on your feet. I found the same thing with software and technology, and the product's always evolving. The market is always changing. So once I got hooked in 2000 with one minor 8-month departure, I stayed in technology. And then in 2016, I started my sales consultancy business and really wanted to help others, like the companies I've been working for, but wanted to help more people. And so I've been doing that for 10 years now. And I enjoy spending my time helping early stage B2B founders build out, formalize, document, and scale their sales team so they can scale their revenue.
There had to have been an inciting event beyond you left the other career, you get into the SaaS world, and there is a first company. You had to help somebody first, right?
Yep.
So can you walk us through what was that story and any type of trials or tribulations around that? Because I know for me, that first one was like a pivotal one, and it led the path for all other ones. So I'm curious about what happened for you there.
Yeah, that was definitely a multiple hat wearing situation. I took a chance on the owner, and I say that, but then now I know because I'm older that he took a chance on me as well. I went in with no job description. He just needed help. He needed somebody with some business acumen. I was the ripe old age of 30 and was older than most of the individuals he had hired and were working for him in the company. And so really I followed him around like a puppy for about 2 or 3 weeks to every meeting. And then at some point he started offloading other things. So at some point I gave myself the operations manager title when I started taking over HR, benefits. I say if the fax machine or the printer was clogged, that was me. If we were out of Post-its, that was me. And back in the day, things were not very secure. And so the server was just up the hall in a closet on the floor that we were on. And so if the server needed to be rebooted, that was also me. So I think what I loved most about it was like every day was a different day. There was so much going on that really fit my personality. I don't like doing the same thing any 2 days in a row. I knew nothing. Benjamin, I had no idea what I was doing. I had literally been putting price on clothes and marking those down and running sale promotions. I'd had an assistant buyer and a clerical assistant. But other than that, I did not have any clue about managing salespeople. And so I reached out to a recruiter that I knew and said, hey, I've landed myself in this situation. Over the next few months, the owner started giving me more and more sales leadership type responsibility. And I knew that I was a little out of my skis. So I called my recruiter friend Steve and I said, hey, I need to meet with other sales leaders like me. And again, I think a little bit of foreshadowing into the world that I now live in. But I said, I really do need them to be like me. Like I need them to be in privately owned, small companies, fewer than 10 sales professionals, fewer than 50 employees, because I think that world has very unique challenges. And so my buddy Steve introduced me to 6 or 7 other sales leaders in the St. Louis area that were like me in companies that were like mine. And we met monthly for years. And everybody, we exchanged offices. So each month we went to somebody else's office and we just brought our problems to the table and spent 2 hours just solving problems. Around the end of the year, we would sit down and do our comp plans together and strategic plan. But I remember none of us had handbooks when we first started. So we built out handbooks together. I remember when one of the sales leaders walked in and said, okay, so I now have my first pregnant commission-based sales rep. Now what? We didn't have plans for any of that. So we were in it together, and I still have some very close friendships going all the way back 20 plus years.
Very cool. So you dove into the deep end. figured it out on the fly. I think, as frankly, most of us do, right?
Yep.
And I actually had a similar situation where I was in the nonprofit world. So I worked for a company called Clean Water Action. Before that, I was raising capital from political action committees for local politicians right out of school. So I had the sales angle, and I got a little bit of management experience in the political realm when I was really managing the campaign itself. So all the volunteers and the campaign director, as well as the actual candidate themselves. But when I got into I went to PBS, public
Oh, yeah.
broadcasting, and then also Clean Water Action. And it was the first time I managed a door-to-door sales team. So I got started more in the B2C fundraising
Yeah.
door-to-door world. And I was so sick of making no money, and complete happenstance. This was not meant to happen in my life. I was supposed to be Mr. Fundraiser, political guru guy. And I think I had a pipe dream of becoming a president at some point. Yeah, I think my brother's better suited for that because he doesn't get scared in front of crowds. But for me, I got lucky. One of the guys called me who I ran their campaign and said, "Hey, we got this startup going. Would you like to do sales for it?" And it was
Nice.
in the oil and gas industry. And
Oh,
I had like absolutely no clue what I was doing other than I knew I was good on the phone. I could get people to do what I wanted. So I remember just like picking up the first magazine and saying, "Okay, I'm going to cold call this guy." And I cold call him, and I sold him a $20,000 retainer agency project off of a cold call day one. And everyone's like, "How the heck did you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just did it." And the rest is history. But it took like very strange breakthroughs that were not planned and completely unexpected, and was not where I thought my life would lead. And somehow that dovetailed into B2B SaaS sales as well. So kind of similar situation. How did you meet your first, I don't call the person partner, but I guess client? How did you meet that person?
yeah. Great question. I tell people sometimes if you're interested in being a consultant, you might not want to hear my founder story because I didn't really have the hustle struggle as some people do. I had really immersed myself in the St. Louis startup community. I was mentoring an accelerator here in town, some of those cohorts, and had relationships with some VCs in town as a result of working for some VC-backed companies here. And so I had was looking for actually was looking for my next sales leadership opportunity. I wasn't looking for a consulting opportunity at all. I was looking for my next sales leadership opportunity. So started to do my networking locally and ended up having breakfast with a general partner at Cultivation Capital, who's the largest VC in Missouri. And again, no intention other than to make a new friend and get my name out there and meet somebody new. And we parted. When we parted, I had no idea the impact that he would have on me in my career and my life going forward. A couple of weeks later, he called and said that they had just invested in a cybersecurity company based in St. Louis, and the founder needed to start building out a sales team and didn't have a clue. And would I have coffee with him? So I said, sure, I would be happy to. I spent 90 minutes with the founder and told him everything I thought needed to be done in order to hire his first, second, or third sales professional. He took copious notes, so I was very impressed. I was a good student. And as we were walking out of Starbucks, he turned to me and said, "This was super helpful. I'm really grateful to everything that you shared with me. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm qualified to do almost anything you told me needed to be done." He said, "Who can help me do this?" And I said, "I can." And that ended up being client number one. Within 3 months, I had 3 fractional sales leadership clients. And that's how I built my business. I built my business on fractional sales leadership, which I still do from time to time, but is not the core of my business anymore. But all in SaaS. I had been interviewing with a fintech company to be a sales leader. They had 2 AEs and an SDR. So after the cybersecurity company decided to bring me on, I had worked for the first company I'd worked for 10 years, the e-learning company. We had a channel partner. He had reached out while all this was going on and asked me if I would help him look under the hood of the books. He'd had some profitability issues the last 2 years and wasn't sure why. Asked me if I'd take a look. So I had met with he and his accountant over a Saturday to review the numbers with them and had found some things that I thought were impacting that profitability number. He asked me if I would run a couple of webinars, workshops for his sales team and his CSM team. And then while I was still interviewing, I went back to the husband and wife team after ironically learning that they had been working with Mike Weinberg. And I had breakfast with Mike one morning and said, maybe they should be fractional clients of mine. They have 2 AEs and an SDR. I don't know that they actually need a full-time sales leader. And he goes, I think that's a great idea. Let me pitch that to them. So I got my first company through my good friend, John True at Cultivation Capital. My second came from a prior relationship. That gentleman, after I did the couple of workshops, said, hey, you're way more qualified to do this than I am, and I've been doing it poorly. So would you come on and be my fractional sales leader for my sales and customer success team? I said yes to that. And then the husband and wife team said yes to me being their fractional sales leader. So within 3 months of starting my job search, I was no longer looking for a W-2 job and was a 1099 employee.
That's an amazing story. So it sounds like being in the network of the startup community was a core idea, a core lesson
Yeah,
for
I
you.
think there are two things. That's definitely one of them. I wanted to be part of that community. I wanted to give back. I say you can give in a lot of ways to a lot of different charities, but I always give back first in my backyard to the startup community for people who, in some cases, early stage founders who are still working their W-2 job and doing this on their side and can't afford someone like you or me. So that's my first give back. The second lesson I would say is I had a motto for a long time, and I think it's in your Christieism card deck that I sent you, which is I have 30 minutes for everyone. And so
It's right here.
thank you. I had generously been giving back. So at any point, if someone called and said, hey, can you talk to my friend? Can you look my son's resume over? Can you help me prep for the big interview? And in a variety of other ways, but I have fairly strong writing skills. I'm a journalism major and I've been in the space for a while. So I had always said, yes, I have 30 minutes for everyone. And more, year after year, more and more people had taken me up on that. So I think the other lesson learned is I think when the universe, I say, conspired to make this happen for me. And I think it's a result of my level of generosity. I say my generosity is my superpower. And so I give without expecting anything in return. But when I did start to look for my job search and reached out to people, people connected me. The general partner at Cultivation Capital, I had a relationship with Cultivation, but I didn't know this gentleman. My boss from the e-learning company, those first 10 years in SaaS, he's the one that recommended I talk to them and talk to him and put us together. And so I think it was to say, do the right things and the right things will happen. And I think the other lesson here is I've been doing the right things by a lot of people over a lot of years. And I think the world came back and to provide me some help.
So imagine somebody is just getting started and they're listening to this. And I'm not sure if you've been in the community yet. We have 1,200 aspiring agency owners and probably fractionals and GTM experts. Not all VPs of sale or fractional CROs necessarily, but they're probably interested in something that you've already achieved. So what would be your advice to them if they're just getting started? And what kind of timeline do you set as an expectation for them?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think you first and foremost need to understand your superpower, right? Like maybe what do you do differently than other people, or what do you offer? What is your differentiator? And then build your services around that. Like I said, I started out as a fractional sales leader, but about 18 months in, I was exhausted. So I was running 3 companies as a fractional sales leader. And then I was doing such a nice job for Cultivation that they were putting me with companies in Indianapolis. So now I'm driving to Indianapolis 1 to 2 times a month doing it there. But I was starting to get exhausted. And so, I didn't think it was repeatable. Here I am in an ARR driven business, right? Where annual recurring revenue is everything. And I thought once I get this company to a certain level, they're going to need a full-time sales leader. This fractional thing isn't going to work for them anymore. I'm going to work myself out of a job. And then
Mm-hmm.
what? And so at some point I decided that I was exhausted and this was maybe not the best business model, but it did get me on my feet. So I
Mm-hmm.
reached back out to the general partner at Cultivation and said, hey, what else do your clients need? You put me in a lot of nice situations. My very first client, the cybersecurity company, was purchased by Cisco 18 months later. So that was the big initial feather in my cap. I was being able to tell that story. But I said, what else do they need? And in talking to him, I realized that again, founders who've been founder-led selling, everything's in their head and not on paper. And so hiring that first sales professional normally is a fail because they're just trying to sit beside them and transfer the tribal knowledge, but there's nothing on paper. There's no playbook. They may or may not have a CRM system. It may or may not be customized. And so again, I was just doing my discovery with a very well-known VC in town and getting that information. And at that point, I took a big relook. So about year 2, I took a big relook at my services and decided that, yes, I would still do fractional, but I only wanted to do one client at a time. But what I really wanted to do is help people build out a formal and documented process. And then once that was done, I naturally started to help people hire. So I say my team and we are not a staffing company. We don't source. We don't charge a percentage of base salary. We literally project manage the hiring process for early stage founders from start to finish, meaning we write the job description. We never leave the founder alone in interviews. We lead all of those interviews. We don't trust them to make the right decision because sales professionals are professional interviewees, buyer beware. And then everything from the offer, making the offer, putting the offer letter together if they don't have one, coming up with the compensation plan, coming up with the revenue quotas, and then sticking around for the first 2 weeks of onboarding to make sure they don't screw that up either. So I found that was a natural transition. So at least I was getting getting the consulting around the formality of the process, then taking that and then being, again, it was really almost impossible for them to interview candidates who had all these questions and they had no answers. They're like, what does onboarding look like? Or what about this? And what about that? And how many stages in the sales cycle? And how long is the sales cycle? And they're like, eh. So we really found that we couldn't really even hire sales rep number one until we had all this documented. And we knew that we can then teach that. And hiring sales rep number one, I think, is the hardest thing ever. You need a very high risk profile, and it's very risky on both sides, but it was way riskier. And I heard a lot of failure stories when they were literally just trying to transfer knowledge verbally. That doesn't work.
I have a saying that sales operations and enablement eats sales for lunch, which is just that if you don't have your documentation in place or your process clearly identified, and there's not an agreed upon system from which everybody can look at and understand their goals and their daily objectives and what steps they need to be taking, and all of that needs to be foundational. And it's true. It's so true, is that sales operations, even as a word, like revenue operations, it's not something people think about. It's not sales enablement. What's sales enablement? If you tell, I have clients that are doing $50 million a year in revenue, and I'm like, yeah, you need better sales enablement. And they're like, what is that? And so it's not just a startup problem. It's just a big company problem in general for certain types of founders. Like the guy that gets to $50 million somehow by himself, but he's trying to get to the 100 million. It's what's your problem? You have zero sales enablement. You have zero sales training. Your people are churning out. You're spending 10 times
A lot of
more
money
to train every single rep.
That's right.
So I hear you. So that then the offer you guys now go to market with, is it mostly sales hiring and training, or are you coming in, are you actually architecting the entire sales process like with an out of the box solution, or is it all bespoke? What does that look like?
Everything is customized. Some people have varying things, but in general, building out the sales processes. So I don't know, I have 15 topics that we need to cover. I do it workshop style. So I do it as opposed to doing it and then doing it in a bubble and then training on it. I force everybody in the organization who has any value whatsoever. So sales or marketing, customer success, founders, whomever. I force everybody into a room 1 to 2 hours a week where I basically play facilitator and I hold a workshop. And I have a topic. Sales stages is the topic. Discovery is the topic. Objections are topic. Negotiations the topic. Pricing the topic. And I ask it again, then I just do my discovery thing, right? I just ask a bunch of questions. And I told them, I said, at the end of the day, this is your retirement plan. My retirement plan is dependent on you doing well because all of my business comes from referrals. But in general, this is your retirement plan. This is your baby. You gave birth to it. And so I'm going to facilitate. I'm the SaaS expert. If you're off in left field, I'm going to bring you back to center. But in general, I want everybody to have an open conversation. I want everybody to hand stack and agree that this is what the right thing to do going forward. And I said, listen, all playbooks are working documents, right? At the $1 million mark, which is where most of my clients are, they had to get to $1 million in order to get some funding from a VC. So at the $1 million mark, I said, what got you here won't get you to 5 million. And what got you to 5 million won't get you to 25 million. So everything, we need to have an open mind that this is what's working today. Because the other thing I think people don't really realize, I talked to a founder this morning and he was very excitable. He's a HubSpot partner. So they resell and then they do onboarding, they have professional services. And he listed like, I don't know, 7 lead sources, right? All over the board. And I said, how many AEs do you have? And he said, oh, I'm doing that right now. And I said, great. He goes, but I have 3 BDRs. And I said, the bottom line is you have 3.5 humans, right? You can't boil the ocean. He's North America is my target. And I said, that's also too big, right? And so I was like, I am about Tam, Sam, and some, but only for your pitch deck in order to get funding, right? Once you've gotten funding in your pitch deck, you can put it in the drawer. Nobody cares. Let's not talk about that anymore. Let's talk about segmentation and micro segmentation because you only have 3.5 humans. If you want to even count the co-founder as a half a human, right? And I think those are the kind of challenges that I see every day. And by being able to do it in workshop style where everyone is there, everyone's going to understand, at least this group of people that are in this place and time in the startup will say, yeah, that makes sense. You're right. We don't have most of the companies I work with don't even have marketing, right? They may have a freelancer who's writing some content, but there's no They may have an agency, probably not. VCs inevitably want you to spend those first few dollars on product and people, but when they say people, they really mean salespeople, not just people. So again, I say there's plenty of job security in what I do. And the nicest thing is there's not a lot of unique challenges. There may be uniqueness within, I think selling a service is much harder than selling software. So there's some unique challenges when you're selling professional services or you're a custom dev shop or something like that. But in general, most of the founders around the $1 million mark are all suffering from the same diseases and need somewhat of the same medicine.
Yeah, what you just said about the services versus software. I've done 2 agencies and I've done a handful of SaaS and DaaS companies. And you're so right, is that agency services is just so much more difficult because differentiation becomes a lot more. And if your product is well positioned and you built a good product at the product management level, then it should be well differentiated from the start. Because if you have product-led growth, if you have good trend, if you have happy customers, they're choosing you for a reason. So it's built into the nature of the sale. Whereas on the service side, especially with these founders that have never built an agency before, they're just like, I offer social media management. So does 10,000 other guys saying the same thing. And it is a challenge to differentiate, especially in a bloody market where it's so, and ironically, it's like compounding because you have more competition with less differentiation. And it's like you jump on a call and it's like, how do you even compete? Even for me on my cold email agency side, which is, it's more of like a revenue operations cold email agency mixed in with some strategy, kind of like yourself, but there are some tactical services we offer. I was on a call yesterday and the guy was like, this is my 8th call. It's great. It's like 8th call. And so then this guy said that, and now I have to untangle the web of whatever some guy in Pakistan just said that isn't true. And I have to then compete against these other voices. Whereas my software company, whether it's Ops, which is my own personal company, or Wellsite Navigator, which is one of my clients' companies, and I'm a fractional CRO at, we go in and it's, look, this is the market. These are the competitors. This is how we're different. Very clear distinctions.
The battle card is really specific.
Very clear.
Yep.
So what would you say to a service company owner? How would you help them differentiate, or what kind of positioning would it be are you going into their world and helping them think about their services and their offering and their positioning, or is that more in the marketing realm and you don't touch that?
I do dabble in that. In general, again, I read a book, The Rockefeller Habits, years and years ago. I was in my 30s, and they called it Knowing Your Hedgehog. And I call it knowing your swim lane. I have picked a very specific swim lane. I say I do 0 to 5 million, and really I do 1 to 5 million in SaaS, B2B, startup founders. I have a very specific swim lane, and this is all I do. So I know it inside and out. I try to help them figure out, again, what's the mini sub segmentation, the micro sub segmentation. Because if you can own this little thing, whether that's, the prospect today mentioned health tech. I do really well with health tech. Okay. But what size of health tech, right? There's a variety of health tech companies. And so I think the thing that I really try to impose upon them is, again, the lack of humans, that they have very few humans. And even just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Just because you're a HubSpot agency and you can sell HubSpot to anybody or help anybody on board or become their fractional admin doesn't mean you should. And I think if you're trying to be something to everybody, you're going to be nothing. And so I think whether it's services or SaaS, but to your point, services is so much harder. My hardest clients are always the services folks. I just came off a fractional sales leadership situation with an environmental health and safety company in the Northeast. And it was very difficult. And one of the things that really did differentiate them was the quality of consultants that they had, the staff that they had built, whether that we get the W-2 and they had some 1099 consultants as well. And they really touted, we've gone out to find the best in the industry who really know their stuff. These are 20-year, 10-year individuals. That's how they were trying to differentiate themselves. They were not trying to do everything. They tried to focus on the fact that we're hiring the best people. And so that was what they were standing on. But I think you have to understand what it is that you want to own. Like, you can always expand over time, right? But if you only have 3.5 humans, Canada and the US and Mexico, and any type HubSpot, I'm a HubSpot partner as well. The HubSpot offering has grown exponentially over the years, right? We were all using I'm so old, I was using Goldmine. Back in the day, that was my first CRM system. And then it was Salesforce. And then HubSpot came on the scene, and they're continuing to build out their product and grow their offering. And maybe it's, again, maybe it's a sub segment of that. Maybe you're just going to do sales professional. Maybe you're just going to do marketing automation and not services or something else. So I just think it's all about just crawl before you walk and walk before you run, and then run before you sprint. And I think when you're so excited, right? The founder this morning was so excited. He had been calling everybody who was a HubSpot partner, who were at the top, who were at the diamond level. He's like, I want to be at the diamond level. And so he called everybody who was at the diamond level. He's like, how did you get there? And how did you get there? And so he's telling me all the things that they had done. And I thought, yeah, but I bet they've been doing it long enough that they forgot the first year. Like, where did they really start? And I think, like, why not be a hedgehog? Why not just own your little segment of the world? There are plenty of, like I say, when people call me and say, I want to be you when they grow up, I say, great, the water's warm and there are plenty of companies that need help. Come on in. I'm not worried about competition because I do something that's so very specific. And so you asked me a question earlier, what should people consider? And I think they should consider doing the best job, like doing things at 120% with all those first few clients, because once you get referrals, life gets a lot easier. Knock on wood, I've built my entire business off referrals, and mostly, again, I built it in the St. Louis area, the Midwest, because I had all of those startup relationships. But I've had clients in Israel, I've had clients in Romania, and I've had clients in the UK. So, those came because I did good work. And honestly, like, I don't need to do anything more than $1 to $5 million in revenue companies in the B2B SaaS space. There's plenty of business there to be had.
Yeah, no, it's very well put. And I think that for me, that's always been obvious in the SaaS space. So for example, with ReviOps, it's a new product I'm launching. We are very clear that we're working with cold email agencies in Europe and North America for very specifically using Clay, which is a tool,
Yeah.
Instantly Smartly, Bison,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to be doing more than $10,000 or more per month to even qualify.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was when I got extremely clear on my messaging and what I call our top 6 challenges document that we present them with to see if they have the struggle that we solve, it was like a 95% connect rate. It was like a 90% reply rate. It was like a 80% meeting booking rate, 90% show rate. It's like I send out 3 messages and I'll have two meetings. So when you get extremely dialed, it's like, yes, the TAM might only be, say, 500 people,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't need more than that if your messaging is so tight. Whereas, like, for example, on the agency, the cold email agency side, any B2B business who needs to do outbound, technically you could use cold email, limitations on it, and there's restrictions in terms of conversion rates, and you probably want a pretty large TAM. But beyond those constraints, it could be anything. And so the question really becomes, look, this guy comes to me as a recruiting firm, and this other guy has a 3PL logistics company. And it's like, should we take those on? And it's like the same challenge, which is, no, you got to choose your lane. What are you good at? Like, where are you going to get your first few customers? Because I think also I like this idea of what is a market. Somebody defined it a while ago, and I can't remember where I heard this, but a market is where you have people that are self-referenceable. And so for a dentist in Dallas is not going to reference a Nigerian orthodontist, for example. And yes, they're both dentists, but they're not in the same market because they're not going to reference each other as for feedback. And I like that. Like, okay, if I find 5 DaaS, data as a service, B2B startups that are doing $1 million plus, and they're located in North America, and they have an average order value of, say, 10,000 plus, maybe there's 1,000 of those guys, right? But it's like you get really good with those guys, and all of a sudden that they start to tell each other. And they're like, I work with this person. For me, I hear you. And that's why it's such an easy thing for service-based businesses to fall into that hole, because it's so much easier to serve 1,000 people. Your service is more flexible. You have to develop it for 3 more months, or maybe add on a year or 2 change. And so you're kind of locked into the product manager's original decision on who the ICP was. Whereas services is, yeah, we could do that. Let's take that guy on. Yeah, we're going to do some random stuff today. And I think that flexibility actually ends up being the Achilles heel. So it's interesting stuff. Now, getting back, I want to get into some recruitment because I know that's your sweet spot.
Yep.
And so I want to kind of share like 60 seconds of what I've been through in recruitment. And I'd love you to roast me and tell me what you think I'm missing.
Perfect.
And I'm dead serious. So it's one of those things where you never stop learning. And I think by most accounts, I'm probably pretty experienced in this realm, but I'm sure I'm doing something wrong. So let me give it to you.
Okay.
In the past, we would do a tremendous amount of job posts and we would generate thousands of candidate pools. And what I would do when I was back in Houston is I got to get through these people. We would screen them down to resumes, maybe go from 500 down to 80, like for a sales development. And so my whole thing was like, how can I give people the information without wasting a heck of a lot of my time or my recruiter's time? So my whole thing was like, I'm going to invite 20 people in at once. They're going to come into my office. I'm going to do a whiteboard session and I'm going to pitch them on the deal. And I'm going to say, if you guys want to proceed after knowing the actual realities of the terms, you go to the front desk and you can fill out something. I would do that and then say most of them would go fill it out. And then I'd have some other stupid second and third interview that really didn't test for sales skills. And then I would put them on and I would hire them. And my churn rate was so high. I would just lose sales reps left and right. So about a few years ago, I started thinking to myself, like, everyone, to your point, interviews so well. Sales reps are professional interviewers. They're good at it. So my ability to determine, and I would do personality tests. I had all the Myers-Briggs tests. I had to have value-based tests, all these different tests, and I would try to read their souls. And I found that it was not working. And no matter how much psychological analysis I tried to do with a person, and I thought I had pretty good discernment and judgment, turned out I was completely wrong. I would completely churn out of these people. And this is as a professional CRO, VP of sales. So I started going deeper. And I'm like, how can I test these people before they get on the phones? And I remember back in the day, I would do what we would do for my door-to-door and but like Clean Water Action, where you'd get on the phone and you had to pass a certain quota on the phone, a certain number of dials, a certain number of results within a 48-hour period of some sort, like a test. And that was extremely effective at weeding out people that just were good and bad. And so I started thinking, like, how can I have a test in a B2B context where there is really long sales cycles, especially for senior reps, where you might have a 12-month sales cycle. And then for the SDRs, where it might take 30 days to truly set your first meeting because you're building pipeline. Now, what I came up with was this idea called the 3-day challenge. What I did was I have very good sales enablement. This is predicated on really good systems and sales enablement. And what I would do is I came up with a test where I would say, okay, I'm going to hire you as a 3-day contract. I'll take my 500 reps, boil it down to, say, the top 4, hire them all on a day rate. And so maybe I'm going to spend, say, $4,000, but I'm going to de-risk myself over a 4-month period of time. And I'm going to then put them through 3 days of what I think is most important for me to determine if they're good. Now, basic communication skills and technical know-how and attention to detail, that kind of stuff is important. But for me, on the senior sales leadership side, it was all about, can they pitch and can they quickly adopt the sales operation side? And if they can pitch and they can do that, then I'm going to make an assumption on the prospecting side, which might be false, but I feel confident if I like their pitch and I like their presence on the camera, then that's a good first day. If they pass that, then I'll put them into 2 days of sales operations to see if they'll actually follow process and learn and they're not completely non-technical, which is actually a strange problem with the enterprise senior people.
Yep.
Now, on the SDR front, it's different. I have them learn the sales operations side and immediately get on the phones. I want to see them calling within like an hour of their start because I wanted to see how they handle rejection. I want to see how many dials they can make. I want to see if they can quickly learn the dialer. And then I make an assessment day to day throughout that process. And I have found that is dramatically reduced churn and it's been quite helpful. Nonetheless, it still does not catch everybody. And so it just goes to show that it is hard to hire salespeople.
It is.
So that's my world. I want you to roast it. And I would love to know what your world is and where you think I could tweak my process.
I'm super fascinated. I wish I would have been able to join you on when you bring 20 people into the room and do the whiteboard session. I have never heard anybody do that. That is really fascinating. To your
point,
I
got that from, just real quick, is I got that from when I was younger. I was just out of college and there was this insurance broker position and they put me through it. And so they would bring you into a room and it really qualified it because everyone was like looking around. They're like, oh my God, all these people are applying. And it made you look like you had this big opportunity and they would pitch. They say, this is your comp structure and this is how much you can make. And this is why it's amazing. So you'd come out of, I got to get this job. And I remember I got to the second round interview and the hiring manager, she must have been 24 and I was like 21. And she said something like, your resume clearly just is showing to me that you don't want to be in this field of work. Because it was all like, I was a political science philosophy major. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like she read it wrong because I think I would have been one of her best reps, but she disqualified me because of a resume of a 21-year-old at the time or 22-year-old. And I remember you saying, why didn't you just read my resume? Why did you make me come down here?
Why'd you waste my time?
But exactly, but that's where it came from, and I I've gotten rid of it. I haven't done that for years.
Yeah, the SDR for sure. The SDR job is the hardest to hire for. As you were talking about your process, I was thinking about sports because I often am thinking about sports, and I'm thinking about what you did is basically send a bunch of people to the combine, right? Had them go through the combine, and then you sent them to like summer camp or spring camp for football instead of, and then put them. So you basically put them through we got everybody through the combine. So now you have all the data and stats on them. So that's the resume, and then but actually, what can they do versus what they said they could do? Then you put them in a real life scenario, right? And said, how are you going to do? You just come out of college. How are you going to do with against professionals who've been playing football in the NFL for X number of years? So I think that's really cool. I think the thing I always say to people about SDRs, I'll break them up because as you said, they're very different, is they won't know until they do it if they hate it or not, right? Because there aren't any jobs that very few kids out of college, as I affectionately call them, who worked on campus for the alumni group, like fundraising, like you said, you like how you started, right? Smiling and dialing in between classes at night or whatever to alumni. So these are even friendlier calls, right? Because even as an alumni, you're probably not going to treat the student at your favorite university poorly. But there's very few people like hospitality is not the same. Working retail is not the same, right? Hours are shitty. Customers can be crappy, but it's just not the same. It's not the same type of rejection as you would get in some of those others. I waited tables through high school and college, and I think that gave me a lot of good sales experience, but it didn't give me any experience in rejection because nobody ever just slammed their fist on the table and said, your menu is awful. I'm out of here. It just didn't really happen like that. So with SDRs, so one of the things I'll say first and foremost is I have a very transparent and two-way interview process. So I say to candidates pretty early on the following: you're going to know whether or not this is a good or bad idea way before I'm going to know. So be honest with yourself, because taking a bad fit sales job, particularly a first bad fit sales job, will either A, make you never want to do sales again, or will put you in a situation where, you're like either the company's bad or whatever's bad. But I'm like, one of the things I wrote the book for is because I think a lot of the reasons why sales professionals are only getting to 60% of quota is in a lot of cases, not just because quotas are inflated and VCs are the bad guy, but because they're selling the wrong thing in the wrong industry to the wrong people, working for the wrong sales leader in the wrong company. And so the sooner you understand your secret weapons and superpowers and what you're passionate about, what you like, and then match your skills with an organization. But the only way you can do that is if we give them a chance to ask as many questions as we are asking. Because I really do believe that. I was like, at some point, you should be like, yeah, I don't know that this fits my skill set, my personality. I don't know that I'm passionate about cybersecurity, as passionate as I am about healthcare. So with SDRs, I try to do an overabundance of education, right? So that starts at the job description, like to your point. How many calls are we talking about every day? What's the rejection factor? What's the connect rate? Coming out of college, you don't really know. Seriously, like I put in there, you may talk to 3 out of 100 people every day. Does that sound like fun or no? And so I work them through that. I don't make them do anything that they're not prepared to do. It is my responsibility to train them. And I'm not the like, tell me what your opening line would be. I might give them, but I want to give them a chance to understand. So I let them talk to other people who've done the job. I send them recordings. I give them the stats. And then I basically say, I think the SDR job is the hardest job in sales. And I say that this is the hardest job in sales. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, one of the things that I'm looking for with more senior AEs who are quota carrying is I don't want to train them on things that I don't have the luxury of training them on. When my early stage startups, I don't have the luxury of providing sales training and process training, right? So I ask them a ton of questions about their past life, right? So I say the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So I get nitty gritty. I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes on have them walk me through the sales process. Where do your leads come from? How much has to be self-sourced? Because in general, most of the reps I'm hiring right now are full cycle sellers. Very few of my clients have SDR teams anymore. We're starting with full cycle sellers. We're making sure we're taking the most experienced people to figure out some of the stuff. and then we'll go and hire SDRs after the fact. And so I get really nitty gritty. I want to know everything about every step. What are they doing? Where do they think their superpowers are? And it needs to match. So in a lot of cases, really good, successful sales reps at other things and other companies don't match my sales process. Most of my clients that I'm working with right now have a 60 to 90 day sales cycle. So if you've been doing 6 to 9 months, it doesn't match. And you think you're like, in your mind, you're like, but Kristie, they've been doing the harder thing. They've been trying to keep people warm for 6 to 9 months. Surely they can keep them warm for 60 to 90 days. And I'm like, it's not the same. And I think it's too big a risk. When I can find people that are out there who've done 60 to 90 days, whose average sale is 30,000. So I'm looking for matches within 10 or 15% of what I need. And so I'm just digging and digging and digging. And you don't know what I'm looking for, right? Now you do if you've listened to your podcast, but you don't know. That's why I'm like getting granular with you. And when I want to know exactly where all these leads have come from. How does that first discovery? Is it one discovery? Is it two? How many demos are you doing? Who all's in the demos? I'm asking really specific questions, and they're probably thinking, what is she getting at? And I'm like, I'm looking for perfect fit within 10% of fit. So for
That's
me,
a really great point.
yeah, I mean, for me, yes, they have VC money, but I don't need to, like you said, I don't need to spend it on people who are going to turn. And a lot of times, when I'm one of those people who have a very direct communication style, I normally will tell you right off the bat at the end of the 60 minutes or into the 30-minute phone screen, hey, I'm going to move on to other candidates and here's why. And P.S., here's what I think you should be. Again, I call it the mommy speech, but here's what you should be doing with your life. Like, you have all this experience in 6-month sales cycles. Go do that at $90,000 average sale, right? Why are you even interviewing for a job that's a $30,000 average sale with a 60 to 90 day sales cycle? Even though it sounds like it's going to be easier, it's still relearning. It's relearning something you don't know. And so I think people I say this all the time. You'll appreciate this. We spend so much time figuring out who our ICP is, figuring out who the personas are, figuring out what objections we're going to get, and narrowing our list down to just, again, like you said, the resume of the ideal customer profile. And then sales professionals don't use any of the skills that they use on a daily basis to find their next job. All of a sudden, a recruiter calls them out of the blue and says, boy, do I got a gig for you. And you're so flattered. And the next thing you know, you're interviewing for a job that doesn't match your skill set, who is not your ideal company profile by any stretch of the imagination, or your ideal product or service. And so it's no surprise to me. Everybody wants to blame quotas are unrealistic and this, that, and the other. I'm like, are we going to put any accountability and onus on the sales professional themselves in saying, hey, you took a bad fit job for you? I teach every day this with my customers. This is what fit is. Someone who has a problem that you can solve, who wants to solve it, who's willing to spend money to do so in X period of time. And so I'm very clear about what fit looks like for my customers. And yet sales professionals they're not taking jobs based on fit. They're taking jobs based on a variety of reasons.
You hit on something that this is probably one of the number one mistakes I make, if I'm just being brutally honest with myself. And I do that quite often. And I think that's a critical trait for anybody listening is just, you got to be wrong somewhere. And so you might as well own it so you can be right. So where I've made mistakes, I think even up till today, is this idea of fit. And that's ironic to your point, because I think I make the same mistake, which is I am hyper focused on ICP. If you see my ICP documents, 20-page documents that gets into psychographics, it's crazy. And then I have an avatar based upon each person in the buying committee, and then there's a company account avatar. So the level of detail that I expect is intense. And when I go to hire the role, we do use ICP in our recruiting phrase because it's ideal candidate profile for
Me too.
Customer profile.
Yep, me too.
But it's funny because I'll end up with candidates. Like, for example, we're hiring for an account executive right now for Site Navigator. And my criteria was like, look, we're 6 to 18-month sales cycles. It just completely depends because there's two ways into the account. There's land and expand, which is a 6-month, and then there's a kind of top-down approach. So you can hit the count in multiple ways, and we'll take both. But my whole thing was like, okay, we're going to find enterprise-grade reps that have that type of experience holding the type of quota we want them to hold. And it has to be software specific, ideally in a complex buying cycle, but I'm agnostic to the product they sold before, as long as it's enterprise grade software. And when I started that, I noticed that it was like really freaking hard to hire people into the oil and gas industry, which has a whole slew of cultural differences and ways of selling and ways of being. And I spent a lot of time trying to fit people into that. In fact, I even hired one guy into the role, so stupid in hindsight, where he was an entrepreneur who sold. I can't believe I'm saying this on a podcast, but this goes to show, man, like even the
You're
best
going
of us
public
can,
with this. Be careful.
yeah, it's okay. One of my core values is authenticity and transparency
Okay, good.
and truth.
Here we go.
And so truth sometimes is tough. So I hired a guy into the role that was, he was an entrepreneur and he sold high ticket door installations. And completely not SaaS. He's never done enterprise SaaS, but I really liked the guy's core values. I liked the fact that he was an entrepreneur. I liked the way he presented. I liked a lot of things about him. But when it came to actually getting into the role, it so feels so stupid. This is why we now test for pitch, is that he got into the pitch in the first week. I'm like, man, this guy sucks. Horrible on Zoom demos, horrible with what he's pitching. And I was like, how did I not catch that during the interview process? But I think fundamentally, like, it wasn't even that I didn't ask for that. It was that didn't have the experience and he hadn't been in that situation before. And sure, with enough time and effort, we probably could get him up to speed, but it would take a tremendous effort on my part and also on the company's part in investing. And there's high risk, to your point. What we did, and as we iterated through that, we decided to only go after comparable SaaS companies in the oil and gas space, go after enterprise level reps. They had to have the exact deal cycle we were looking for, some degree of cross sales between field level, mid-level, city level, and enterprise level. And we got very clear and we started sourcing much, much, much better candidates. But it's such a stupid mistake to make for a senior VP, but I was making it. In sales is complex, right? There's a lot of moving pieces if you don't know. If you're not deep into the sales operations world or sales enablement world or sales pitching or process world, then there's recruitment. And so I would say my biggest weakness has always been the recruitment. And I think that you're hitting on my kryptonite, which is I'm not using my own ICP analysis on my candidates and then holding myself to it because I'm just so excited to get the hiring off my plate. I'm so ready to be like, let's get to selling, guys. I just need a candidate. And then I'm like, I'll throw bodies at the seat. And it hasn't worked out well historically. So anyways, I'm going to thank you for that insight.
My pleasure. Have you read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth?
I read it a while ago. I don't really remember the core tenets.
Yeah, I think for SDRs, I try to always think back to the book. And because I think I'm very particular with SDRs because I don't think they know themselves well. And they probably haven't been in a phone type role. So I say to them, like, you won't know until you do it. You think because Uncle Bob at Thanksgiving table said, you should be in sales. And then we responded to your resume. And so you're like, I did a poll on LinkedIn last week before that said, so many sales reps are accidental sales professionals. How did you get in? And a third of people said it was the first job that said yes.
So
A third of people applied and the first job that said yes was sales. And the next thing you know, the rest is history, as they would say. But I think for the SDR job, because it is so hard, the book was very interesting because it says that you always think about is grit nurture or nature. And she was a researcher and she said it was really nature. People got gritty because of experiences they had in their past when they're earlier in their early life. Because she was interviewing a lot of people, but really had focused in on, again, that kids out of college or kids going to college timeframe and what made someone drop out of boot camp at the academy or whatever within the first 2 weeks. And so for SDRs in particular, I like to hire athletes, student athletes in particular. I like to hire people who've been doing something in college, even if it's maybe not at the D1, maybe not the D1 level, but someone who's been a student athlete who understands, I think, the discipline, because I think SDR requires a ton of discipline. The other thing I like to hire is kids who've worked their way through college. So it's that balancing act. It's staying focused. It's knowing where your priorities are. And so there are certain types of things that they've done. It's funny. I've got a friend who has a daughter who's going to be a sophomore in college who has never had a job. Like, she's never had a job. Her mom has always felt like her job was education, right? And I just said to my friend, I said, I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news and I'm not getting involved in your family drama. But I said, in this day and age, having never ever worked, there's no way for any job. I don't care what I was hiring for, sales or not sales. There's no way because she has no clue. She's never proven that she can show up on time. that she'll stay an extra hour when something needs to be done, that she can get along with coworkers, that she can get along with supervisors. There's just no history there. And so again, if you go back to the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, I said, this is a really hard, she's 3 years from being in the job market. And I was like, this is a really hard job market. I don't expect it to get any easier. And so I try to mentor the younger generation. And this is something that really got my attention. And I said, I worked all through high school and college. My brother worked through high school and college. My son worked at Quick Trip. He worked at a country club on the seventh hole, serving up drinks and hot dogs through high school, and then worked at Quick Trip through college. And and he was a pandemic baby. He got transferred back to St. Louis when he was not in college, and then they transferred him back to Lawrence, Kansas. He's a Jayhawk. And Quick Trip is an amazing company to work for. He would tell anybody who asked him, he's like, yeah, I work at the gas station. I'm like, you don't work at the gas station. Don't say that. This is one of the most, I was like, don't tell people you work at the gas station. It's a gas station. I'm like, it's so much more than a gas station. I'm like, that is one of the most successful privately held companies in the country, right? People don't know that is not a publicly held company. That's a privately held company. They are kicking ass and taking names and making a gazillion dollars. But I think there's just something to that. And so kids who've never had jobs, or kids that haven't had to balance work or sports, kids have never had a parent, like kids who've had a parent who's been ill. And I would say in general, when I'm interviewing, I'm listening as a mother now. I listen for clues about things that people will drop little breadcrumbs about, and I'll dig deeper. And I'm like, hey, it sounds like maybe there's a story there. Are you willing to share? And they may say, hey, my mom got cancer when I was in high school, and I had to change the activities I did, or I had to be help with caregiver. It's those kind of things that I'm looking for, those type of individuals that have had some added responsibility, because I think those are the gritty kids who are gonna not freak out at the 98th phone call on day 2, for in your case actually on the hour 3.
So do you test in that way? Or how do you avoid somebody who's sitting there for 3 weeks and they're putting in volume? They might get some early traction, but it's unclear. It's unclear if
Yeah.
they're fit yet, and you're on the fence. How do you not waste 2 to 3 more weeks with that person?
Yeah, it's will versus skill. So I try to separate those pretty easily. Like, how are they doing in training? Are they picking it up? But they're just like, they're struggling to get to 60 calls or 70 calls, versus the ones that are just plowing through the calls, but they freak out when they can't get through the gatekeeper, right? It has to be a combination of will and skill, which I think is what makes that job so definitely hard. And we have to want them to do it. They have to want to do it for 18 months, right? And so this is a burnout job, which is why I tell people, I'm just like, hey, this is a burnout job. And so I'm doing a ton of call coaching initially, right? Are they taking coaching? Are they accepting the coaching? Are they making behavioral change? So I think those are some of my clues. If I'm saying the same thing in week 3 that I was saying in week 1, we're probably not making the kind of progress that we need to make. And again, I'm on your boat. I'm probably most likely to let SDRs go most quickly of any sales professional, any role that I hire, because like they have to be coachable, which is again goes back to why I like athletes, because athletes, particularly at the D1 level, if you weren't coachable, like there's somebody else right behind you who'd be happy to take that spot. So yeah, I think it's will and skill very quickly. And again, the dials, like you have to put in the activity. I say this is a numbers game at this point, right? This is a numbers game. Not like maybe later on when you're working the full sales cycle, but right now you have to give yourself enough at bats. How many times can you get to the plate? And then I said it's a quantity game until it's a quality game. And then once somebody gets on the phone, it immediately switches. You've got the quantity, check, quality, got to be there, and you have 17 seconds. That's what makes this. There's so many things that make this job so hard.
Yeah, we'll put. You've been saying this is something that I think is interesting, because I think we probably have a tactical difference in terms of who we target. And I'm very curious as to why you're choosing it, because I think this is also something I might be making a mistake on. So for me, I have a cutoff. I will not hire an SDR that's less than 25, because I have found that if it is their first SDR job, most of the times they realize they don't want it as their SDR, to your point. And so for me, I've tried to this is like past behavior, future behavior kind of thing. But for me, it's like no behavior, then it's like ultimate risk, because they don't even know for themselves if they have any interest. And I don't want to pay for them to make that realization. But that being said, obviously you can get them cheaper. They're like untapped talent, and so they're probably not burnt out. It is a little strange to me that somebody would just want to be a career SDR. No offense to any SDRs working out there, but for generally speaking, like ambition and drive and those things go hand in hand. And I just want to be an SDR forever. That mean that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, like there's multiple debatable perspectives you could
Yep.
take on this. And I don't think there's a one clean answer, but I'm curious, how do you think about this?
Yeah, we have somewhat similar philosophy. I do not hire kids straight out of college. I make them have 1 year of jobs. I don't necessarily care what it is in general. Like I want them, I would say, I just need someone to teach them how to dress and not to come in hungover on Friday. Right. So I don't want to teach those type of things to anybody. I have no tolerance for that whatsoever. And so I want you to have had a job for at least 12 months where you've had to show up every day, perform. And then I want to know if you weren't doing sales, and why, like why sales? I think one of the things that frustrates me about our industry is that we force everybody into the SDR job. It's the only starter job in our world, right? There's no starter job for sales engineer. There's no starter job for RevOps. There's no starter job for CSM. There's no starter job for implementation specialist. And the other thing I tell SDRs is the following. We're going to we're pigeonholing you and going to force you into this one tunnel. But there are lots of ways out of SDR, as I call it. I said, once you get into SDRdom, you can become a quota carrying AE, or you can become a customer success manager, or you can become an implementation specialist, or you can become a sales engineer, or you can become a RevOps. I think the best RevOps people I've ever had, I'd be interested to see what you think they are. My best RevOps people were people who like lasted 2 or 3 years in sales and then just were like, I just can't do it. But they loved the analytical side of it. Like they were the science of salespeople, but not the art of salespeople. So like my best RevOps people they've done the job. So they've got empathy and sympathy and some compassion for what's going on, but they were like data nerds, right? And
100%.
yeah. So I think the other thing, like I just actually had an employee sales professional quit yesterday, and he started, only the two of us, I think, only the two of us then. But he started on St. Patrick's Day. So that's how long he lasted. And it was funny because 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had said to the CFO, I think he's going to be your next sales engineer. And he was like, why do you say that? I said, he's geeking out on the product. Like he's avoiding the phones. And because I do demo certification, he was a full cycle rep. And I said, you need to spend an hour a day on learning the product. Here are the things we're going to test you on to get your certification or whatever. And he, like, when we did certification last week, and the group, I hired 3 at the same time, they got together, and he was the one who was basically leading the prep sessions. And I knew it. And yesterday when he quit, I knew he'd been taking some coding courses. And so he got his first development opportunity as a dev. And so there's no harm, no foul, right? He'd been in SaaS sales. So again, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. He had done it, but his passion was in a completely different world, which is why, and I told him yesterday, I said, this doesn't surprise me at all. And I said, I thought you were going to be our next sales engineer. But we have to be, I think in companies your size and the companies that you work for, there are lots of paths for people. In the companies I work for, sometimes you have to leave the company to get to the next path. But I would be curious just about your thoughts about this forcing people into the SDR role, and how is that impacting future reps in our industry?
It's one of those things where I think that this gets back to grit, which is end of the day, all of this comes down to whether you're a senior sales rep or not, is can you just continue to move forward in the face of just 98% failure, which is like where most of the dials will not, those that answer, most will not want to talk to you. Yeah, and I think that there is like a cleansing process that has to happen because at some level, that is I don't know if it's an inborn characteristic. I don't know if it's a learned characteristic, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. What matters is, does the person have that ability? And at least from there's kind of 2 competing friction points here, which is on one hand, the person has to realize what is true for them, but also the business doesn't want to pay for it. So it's like the funneling them into the SDR role kind of solves both problems because it's lowest risk for the business, but it also gives people a lot of shots on net to see if they can handle it. So I don't really, given that you're trying to prove that they're actually valuable to the business, and they have to learn the systems anyways. They have to learn the system, the CRM. They have to learn the basics
Mm-hmm.
of the product. They have to learn the ICP. And given that they don't have much experience in the beginning, it's like I can't ever justify just taking somebody with very little sales experience and just throwing them straight into an AE role, unless there was like some tangential, like really similar behavior. Like, for example, like if somebody was high ticket fundraising, you had to meet with multiple stakeholders, but it wasn't sales, but it was similar, I might bypass the role. If there was, I'm trying to think of other examples where that might be true. But for the most part, no, I wanted them to grind. I want to see that they got what it. Layla Hermosi said this recently: is I can give you the skills, I cannot give you the will. And that's the idea. And I think that's 80% of it for me. Then there are skills and there are like just innate born characteristics that make people better. I think Michael Dell said something like he found out when he had a West Texas accent, he did a lot better in West Texas. So there's certain things you can't like control for, but you can test the will and you can test the skill. So unless there's a real exception to the rule, I don't think I would bypass the SDR role. Even for me, like sometimes, especially at startups, like I'll want the person to get to go into the SDR role. Because what I do with some clients, if they're very early stage, is I actually do the first, I don't know, 2 weeks or 3 weeks of calling just to get them right so I can
Mm-hmm.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll bring in an SDR who's actually an AE behind me to set meetings so he can watch me do it. And then we
Mm-hmm.
establish it. He's the founding AE who will later become a sales manager if he's good enough. I come in as a parachute, Green Beret,
Mm-hmm.
Navy SEAL guy who will act as a full cycle sales rep just to establish the initial motion. And then I bring somebody in behind. But I really like that. I like that people have to start from the ground, work up. The exception to the rule would certainly be enterprise because enterprise is a whole beast. But if it's like short sales cycles, 4 to 8 weeks, transactional, I would even start AEs in an SDR role for 2 months just to
Mm-hmm.
get the ICP down. I don't know. I think it's debatable. I think that you can go both ways, but I really like that filtering mechanism.
Yeah, I think my concern is that we're potentially running off good people who really aren't hunters, but they're really farmers or gatherers. They think this is what sales is and they hate it. And I'm like, I tell people, I'm like, when you think about all of the levers you can pull, again, like product or service, B2B or B2C, inside or outside, what industry, what person within the industry, what company, what leader. When you think of all of those combinations, there are thousands of sales roles, but all we ever seem to glorify or talk about is the hunter role, the killer role. And I've had really good introverted AEs who went through the SDR program and didn't get scared off. But I've also almost lost people who truly were customer success individuals because are you familiar with cultural index
I
as
don't
an
think so.
assessment? Okay.
No.
I'm a certified cultural index facilitator. It is a really fast test. It actually takes about 15 minutes in total, and it puts you into one of 18 personality types or role types. I'm a rainmaker. Other people are persuaders, philosophers, those kind of, they give me cutesy names. And, but when I went for training for 2 weeks in Dallas, and one of the things that I struggled with the concept before I ever went for training was it's the very first thing you do. You get the resume in, and before you ever even talk to anybody, you send them this assessment. And if they don't match with most of my clients, if we're looking for an SDR or an AE and we're looking for a hunter, there's only really 3 personality types out of the 18 that we think would
Mm-hmm.
qualify. And, but if they don't fit one of those, like you're done, right? It doesn't matter what your past is. It doesn't matter what experience you have. Like they say you're done. And I really struggled with that. I'm like, I don't even get to talk to them. No. So then I went for training. And then I learned the difference between characteristics and traits. And they taught me that traits are set by the age of 10 and they don't change throughout your life no matter how old you get. And so you used some good verbs and adjectives there a while ago. Ambitious, motivated, like those kind of things are not necessarily nurture and nature, but either way, they can be, I think they're more nurture than nature. That's my opinion. But by 10, it's done, right? And so you're not going to change somebody. And then what they taught me over 2 days is if you hire a misfit, like you've hired him for this job, but they're this type of individual, they will either implode, self sabotage, just flat out fail. And what I came away from after 2 days was like, that's my fault. I set them up to fail. And that's sometimes how I feel about the SDR role, where we're taking really good people that could contribute to our industry in a role that's not a hunter role, but we force them to do this uncomfortable job that doesn't fit their skill set or their traits. And we make them do it for 18 months and they may not, and they may just, they're going to burn out as it is, but it's just like, I keep thinking to myself, like, it's uncomfortable for them. Like they kept saying in the training, you're asking them to do something that is outside of their comfort zone. And so I'm thinking about like somebody waking up every day and going, I just want to learn everything about the person I'm talking to and their vacation and their kids and their hobbies and whatever, the typical customer success manager who wants to know everything about everything. And instead, we're forcing them to not care about any of that and just be brief, be bright, be gone. I struggle with that because I worry about our industry that we're losing good people because we're forcing them into one role that is uncomfortable for lots of people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would say my answer was predicated on the idea the person would be a hunter, AE.
Yeah.
I would say I 100% agree around sales engineer, rev ops, customer success, account management. All of those, you don't need that super grindy personality, grit like personality type. To some degree you do, but yeah, like revenue operations, you could literally just be a developer. You're not client facing at all necessarily.
Yeah.
In fact, like most of the good guys that I know are more like system admin, IT type guys you would not want them on a call at all. Some good guys that are great, but yeah, I agree with you. So let me frame my answer of, if your career trajectory path is SDR, hunter, AE, or full cycle sales rep, and you also want to be a VP, I think it's good to know what it's like because you're going to manage those people. And
Agreed.
It's good to have the grinding experience of having
100%.
gone through it.
Yep.
But I hear you. And I think that is
I think that's something that our industry
roles.
needs to fix. Like we need to have other pathways in to the sales umbrella because the sales umbrella is bigger than just hunter. And I think we're missing out on good talent because we haven't figured out another pathway in.
Yeah, totally. What's interesting is my wife, she works for one of my clients and she's now the director of customer success. But she did start as an SDR role, not because I wanted to brutalize her, but because I needed help and I trusted her on this particular client. I knew that if I brought in another SDR in this role, that it would real high chance of failure. And I wanted to make sure that I could be there with somebody. And she was looking for a new role. She's Brazilian. And so she was transitioning to more remote work because she worked for a company called Belmonte Hotels, which is like a world hotel chain. It's like White Lotus, but in real life.
That
really
sounds like a
people.
really fun job. Who would want to leave that?
What's funny is I guess I was a catch. She had to move to the United States.
Gotcha.
But
nice.
No, but in reality, she was the head of guest relations for Rio de Janeiro. And so she would always handle the celebrities. So she handled Katy Perry, and she told some funny stuff about being in a limousine with Akon and Vin Diesel and David Guetta. And very funny stories about doing this and going to pool parties with Katy Perry. But she had to meticulously know when a high profile guest came, they want in the room. What was their behavior? When did they wake up? What kind of thing would they order on the menu? So she had to create these dossiers on these people. And so very high attention to detail, high hospitality, very good demeanor. So you can never overreact or somebody's saying, there's a fly in my soup. You can't there has to be like deference. There's all these very
important traits that she had to have.
Important traits. Exactly.
Yep.
So I think that in her world, she did not need to be an SDR. I needed her to be an SDR, but she did not need to be an SDR. Right. So for her, I think she is actually better served in the account manager, customer success world, because I think she has that kind of kind, loving, nurturing, supporting nature. And I think she doesn't like the SDR world, but it's a much different world. So I'm with you. And I think that a good way, I think in customer success would be into some type of like guest relations, customer support. That could be a way in, but a place where you have to provide some level of hospitality of some sort, some type of like nurturing or support of. So I could even imagine somebody who was a nurse being
Yeah.
like really good at customer success
Mm-hmm.
because you're constantly having to attend. You have to check on things. If you forget that alarm, that person's going to die. You got to be checking that
Yeah.
stuff. So those are behavioral requirements. And I think there's a proof that they're able to handle that kind of stuff. And it's just a transition to, do you have good bedside manner literally at the bedside
Right.
versus can you handle somebody on the phone when they're freaking out? So I'm with you, especially on the customer success side. I do think the personality is much different there. I
Oh,
would
yeah.
say that like I do well at customer success on software. I think I do a poor job at not poor. I would say relatively speaking, a poorer job on services.
Services side.
Because on software, it's the software's fault and it's the dev team's fault. I can apologize for that, but it's like when the services are bad, I'm like,
It's a
that's
human's
me, you
fault,
know?
right? Yeah, it's a human fault.
Exactly. So, okay, in summary here, it sounds like really looking for ICP, ideal candidate profile, in the job, looking for behavioral characteristics that match, ideally, traits that match, and then also looking for proof in past experience that matches. So it's not just they did the actual thing, but there's also other related characteristics like athletics or some other type of job, like we're describing like nursing, for example, customer success, where say there's some type of union between the experiences that could translate. Is there anything missing there? What did we miss?
I think you mentioned it earlier again, and I mentioned it too, like the assessment, right?
Excuse me 1 second. I'm so sorry. Just lost my head. Okay, I'm going to say, what did we miss again? And
Okay.
we'll go
Yep.
from there. And this is 124:49. And by the way, when do you have a hard stop?
I'm good.
What was I going to ask?
What did we miss?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I have to do it without laughing. Can't come in because the cut's going to be like completely different face and then in. Okay, so what did we miss?
I think we talked about it, but we didn't drill into it. And I think it's just multiple touch points, right? So the assessment is a part of every one of my interview processes. Sounds like the same thing for you. And I don't, again, like I say, I don't care what assessment you use. I do a little bit, but I want to just gut check. As long as I've been hiring sales professionals for 25 years, you've been hiring sales professionals for double-digit years. But even then, like you say, occasionally we mishire, right? And so if I use the example I just gave you, I knew he was taking coding classes, but I probably didn't ask enough questions around that. So what's the end game here, friend? And in my mind, I went ahead and got him his next job in my head, right? I was like, oh, sales engineer, that's what we'll do with you, right? I'm like, we're going to blend the sales that you had with this new experience that you're getting. And obviously you have interest in that. It's perfect because we're going to need a sales engineer probably by the end of the year. But I wasn't asking enough questions around that. So I also think, again, like that flip the script thing, right? So the first couple of interviews are really all about me figuring out if you have the right prior experience with, again, have you done something similar to what we're doing? What roadblocks have you come up against? But then I really want to flip the script. Like I want them, I then assess them. I send them through the assessment after the second interview. So I do phone screen, first formal interview. For EAEs, for enterprise account executives, we do 2-hour-long formal interviews before I put them through the assessment. And then from that point forward, it really is more about them. So I never, ever, it's not a secret. Every time you take an assessment, we're going to do a 30-minute call to review the assessment because the assessment's going to give me, I'm going to have missed some things that assessment will show me. One of the things with the assessment I use a lot is about energy level. And it's on a scale of 1 to 10, and again, it's not a pass fail. I've profiled top sales professionals, SaaS sales professionals in the past. Some of them score 8, 9s, or 10s on energy level. But when I see a 4, 5, or 6, I automatically almost always know that I have an introvert. And so we talk about it, and I just come out with it. I said, hey, it's been my experience then when you've scored, it has more to do with you being an introvert than it has to do with anything else. And they will say yes. And the reason why you miss that is because introverts, they know how to get up for the moment, right? They know how to get on stage. They knew how to perform when they need to perform. It just is their recovery time at the end of the day is so much longer, right? They don't want to go to happy hour at the end of the day. They don't want to come home and talk to the cat. They just want to be with the cat, right? They need more recovery time. And that's again, it's just a knowledge point for me to truly understand that, hey, if I need you to go to a conference, I shouldn't really force you to happy hour out to dinner with us at the end of the day after you've already spent 12 hours with us. You probably just want to go order room service, and that's going to be okay, right? That has to be okay because I won't have you won't be good the next day if I don't give you that time to recharge. And so at that point, doing the assessment, really digging into it with them, giving them an opportunity to talk to other people. I put them in front of marketing. I let them ask any questions. At this point, I don't sit. A lot of times, if I put them with another rep, that's a private conversation. I'm not in on that. Neither is anybody at the organization. They get to have a private conversation. And I tell the rep this, hey, you're not qualifying them for the job. We've already done that. I want them to know what I said, I always ask candidates this after they become an employee. 4 weeks in, I say, what did you not, what were you not prepared for? And then I do it again at 3 months and I do it again at 6 months. And so that's how I hone my process. So I tell the people that they're talking to, I want you to be fully transparent about the organization, about the leader, about the challenges, about a day in the life of, because I don't want to hire someone who's not an educated consumer. And that's where I think a lot of people fail in the hiring process, is they think it's all about me and making sure that I know everything I need to know about you without them knowing everything they need to know about the company and the leader. And so I try to give almost 50-50 time, which most people don't do. I try to give the candidate equal amount of questioning time that I took myself, and with the guise of, hey, you're going to probably figure this out before I will, because you know yourself better than I ever will in 4 or 5 hours. And I want you to, and I say to them, like, I wrote an entire book. And now I can say, I wrote an entire book about this. I don't want you to take a bad fit job, because you'll either hate sales, fail out, decide that this isn't for you. And I don't want that. If this is truly, sales is truly where you belong, I want you to have a positive experience. I want you to be happy every day. I want you to get to 90 or 100 or 110% of quota. I don't want you to struggle, because that's not any fun. So I try to make it an equal two-way street.
So what is the name of the website of the assessment that you do?
I use an assessment by Wiley and Sons, the book publishers. They have an assessment division, and it's called the Sales Profile Assessment. It's ACT meets Myers-Briggs is how I describe it. There is truly a verbal and math section. So there's verbal ability, verbal reasoning, numeric ability, numeric reasoning. Top hunters profile 8, 9s, and 10s on numeric reasoning. I call it the puzzle piece part. Like, you're willing to figure out the puzzle piece, but it truly is like sharpen your number 2 pencil and head to the cafeteria for your ACT test. And then the second part is all about you. Do you want to swim with the sharks or swim with the dolphins? It's very binary. So it doesn't give you 4 choices. It literally is, do you want to swim with the sharks or swim with the dolphins? It's very binary. So it forces people, because people are like, people hate the assessment. They find it very fascinating. The results are very spot on. And the better you know yourself, the more spot on the results are. But they're like, would you ever own a gun? Like, how do you feel about gun control? It's got some very controversial questions in it. And you have to pick, there's no fence setting. You have to say, do you want to skydive? Or when you go on vacation, do you want to skydive or sit on the beach with a book? There's no, but occasionally I'd like to play sand volleyball. Nope, not an option. So it really forces people into corners and gives you a pretty clear picture of what people look like when forced with a gun to their head. Is you have this choice or this choice, period, end of story. You don't have a C or a D to choose from, or every one of them. So yeah, I've been using that assessment, and they have it for everything, by the way. They have it for hunters, farmers, gatherers, sales leaders. So they have it. You just tell your rep, this is what I'm hiring for. I have profiles at this point built in SDRs versus AEs versus enterprise AEs. So they can build out a profile for anything. I've got profiles over all these. I've been using them for 20 years. And it really is again, the assessment's not the important part. It's the conversation you have afterwards. That's the important part.
So I used to use heavily the DISC assessment. DISC.
I have not tried DISC on candidates, but I've taken DISC. I'm a high D. You're not surprised.
Yeah, and so because I was very interested in like how it tests behavioral and also tests values, and it had a bunch of questions, and I'd say, this is saying this about you. Is this true? And I would have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that it didn't ultimately, like, they would say the right things and it sounded correct, and I'd have a sense of who I thought the person was, and then they'd still act differently. I'm like, what the hell, man?
Yep.
So I'm like, on one hand, I really like the idea of the assessment. I like the idea that there's this thing that will tell me about somebody and read the tea leaves about them before I can. And yet, nonetheless, I find that oftentimes it still gets violated in terms of the actual output. So I'm curious on this other test, because I definitely want to check it out. You're saying that you find it is accurate. How accurate?
Accurate, like I said, it's not about the assessment. It's about the questions you ask afterwards. Like, I find things out. So you have to take a bunch of things into account. Like I said, I've been using the assessment for 20 plus years. So a lot of times when you ask people these questions, certain questions, they're thinking about the last or the most recent situation that fits that, right?
Mm.
And like I say, like in a lot of cases, sometimes I get weird, like a few times you've interviewed them for an hour and a half or two, and the assessment comes back and you're like, who the hell have I been interviewing? And I'm like, what did I miss? And so when I get them on Zoom and we go over the assessment, I say to them, hey, listen, like what the assessment showed me isn't who I thought you were. So this isn't a pass fail. I've profiled A players who've been successful in a B2B SaaS situation in X role, and you're not fitting that profile. So I need to understand why. And in a lot of cases, they'll be able to even pinpoint. So again, like they test a bunch of traits, right? So from energy level to independence to manageability to team, if team is important. And so sometimes we see they're off the grid a little bit from the profile. And they're like, yeah, you know what? Like, I didn't have an opportunity to be independent at my last role because it was so prescriptive. And I was forced to read the script the way it was written. There was no flex. And I'm like, okay, so that makes sense. Like I call it the puppy mill syndrome, right? So you were beaten into submission. And so you are an independent person, but you took a wrong fit job and you got forced into a situation that was outside of your comfort zone. But when we ask you these questions, the first thing you think about is the last puppy mill experience, right? People don't have psychological, right? You're not looking at your entire lifespan and going, oh, in general, you're answering this binary question. Are you more likely, like I ask a question in the interview, I say, are you more likely to plan happy hour or attend happy hour? There's really no wrong answer for me. I'm just curious, right? I'm just curious if you're going to be the guy that rallies everybody, and it's particularly in a remote environment. I need some of those people. So if I've got a team currently of a lot of people who want to plan happy hour, but not a lot of people who are always committed to showing up, then that's a bad balance. I need an equal amount of people who are going to rally the troops for happy hour and an equal amount of people who are like, oh man, if you plan it, I'm there, but I don't plan it. So I think it's really more about the conversations that we have. And then the assessment, I say, decides for you what you should be doing with your life. It gives you a bunch of professional options. And in general, we're looking for three. So the top three professional options are enterprising, administrative, because as the CRM is real, and if it isn't in the CRM, it isn't real. And so there is a certain amount of administrative work that goes with that. And then mechanical. People who make the best hunters are mechanical. And the other options, by the way, are technical, customer service, and creativity. I'm always fascinated when I see people who fall into the creativity category and I know I've missed something. So I say, hey, like you profiled as someone who's a creative and I didn't see that. What did I miss? And they're like, oh, I write music or I write poetry or I paint. I've always been a painter, but I can't make a living doing it. And so it just gives me so much more information in this, as opposed to saying, hey, like, what do you do on your weekends? They may or may not want to disclose they may not want to disclose that. That may be painting in a studio in their back office, maybe something that's a private thing for them. But when the assessment calls it out, there's a little bit of pride, right? Oh, they got it right. They saw something that I don't normally share with others.
Do you find that people lie about the results of the assessment?
Yes, they can, but really more so the assessment doesn't truly allow, because it's so binary, it truly forces them in. And then there's like a truth scale, right? And then it says on the assessment, and anything below, like in general, it's normally a 9 or 10. Anything below that, I almost have to just discard the assessment. And sometimes if you're really young and you haven't, let's take my friend's daughter for an example, who's never had a job. She may answer the same type of question multiple ways, even though everybody knows that you're not supposed to, because she doesn't know herself well enough yet. She hasn't had enough of those experiences to pull from to say, in this situation, I would do this. She hasn't had she's had an educational experience only. So she may not know, she may in one say go, if this situation, I would do this, but in this situation, I do this. So no, in general, and again, like I think more people thank me at the end of that interview, if that section of the interview process, they're like, this was so fascinating. It was because it felt like I was really trying to get to know them because I was really trying to get to know them. And as the more times you talk to people, the more likely they are to say something stupid, say something that they didn't intend to say, or just like you said, or just be authentic. And then I would say, hey, thanks so much for the transparency and authenticity, but I think this is the wrong job for you. And this is what I think the right job for you is. And I'm one of those people that I'm like, hey, and if I have another client that's looking for that job, I'll refer you. I ask all my clients when I start working for them, hey, if I get a resume that's not a fit for you, but it's a fit for another client I'm working with or another client I've worked for, may I share that resume with another client or somebody else I think might be able to help? They always say yes to that. And so again, like my mission in life is to make sure that we have happy salespeople who are successful and can live the kind of life that they want to live and make the kind of money they want to make. And putting someone in a bad fit job doesn't accomplish my ultimate goal for other people. And I want everybody to love the job as much as I love my job. And I make good money because I think I love what I do and I'm good at what I do. And so it affords me a lifestyle that I enjoy as well. So I want everybody to have that opportunity. Whether or not you take advantage of that opportunity, I can't control that. But I can say, hey, based on all the things you shared with me as we reviewed the assessment, I don't think this is the right job for you. I think this is what you should be doing. And I think the assessments helped validate that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that sometimes we have to help people help themselves in a way, because you're right, is that especially to your point at the younger age, you don't have the level of self-awareness to know what is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem that I have found for myself is that I want to believe in everybody. So if they believe in themselves,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yes, you can. And I will give you a chance.
Aren't you sweet?
Especially with the SDRs.
Yeah. I honestly,
So-
I'm not as nice as you. But I am on the back end. I'm just not as nice as you on the front end because I truly believe that failure in sales is a lot of misfit roles and superpowers. And so if I can put you in the right fit role and help you get there, because I have a lot of connections, I know a lot of people, I have a lot of former clients, I got a lot of current clients. And if I can say, hey, let me help you get the right fit role, even if there's nothing in it for me, but do the right things and the right things will happen. I think the universe will always come back and protect me and take care of me. But I truly want I don't want to lose good people out of the sales world just because I'm trying to fit, because they're like, I can do it. So you would say, yes, you can. And I'm going to be right by your side. And I'm like, you can do it, but probably only for 12 months. And then you'll be miserable. And then where does that leave us both?
It's looking at the present fit and then the future fit and how it aligns for both parties' interests. And it's the old Charlie Munger quote of show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And this gets back to the point about the developer guy that you hired, which is, and I do ask this quite often with the hiring process, which is like, what is your dream really want? And I think some people don't know. And that's where it gets tricky.
It's true.
It's funny because I'll ask that question. I'm like, what is your perfect sale? What is the perfect job for you? What is the perfect sales job for you? I get people giving me wishy-washy answers. I want to work with a company that has a good product and
good
that I can
values
sell
and a
stuff
good
at.
culture. Right.
Yeah. And it's, don't we all? Of course. But like deeper than that. And I think I don't think they're trying to give me a cliche answer. I think that they haven't thought about it that deeply. I think some people like I went through a life coaching event 10 years ago, and I remember one of the exercises was the what do you want exercise. And the idea was you just had to come up with, they literally would get in your face and you would scream, you'd be like, what do you want? What do you want? And you'd have to be like, and people would just start yelling shit. And it was so funny because people would say stuff they didn't even, or maybe they were just saying they needed to say something, but people would be like babies, random stuff like that. But what was funny about that event was it showed to me that a lot of people didn't know what they wanted, and they had these epiphanies of, wow, I didn't even know I wanted that. And then they became aware of this level of want. And I think actually one of the hardest things in life is knowing what you want. So it's funny to see these people in these interviews, not funny, but it's like anthropologically funny. It's just a curious thing about human beings that you ask them and they just sometimes just don't know. So their default response is, good job, nice pay income. But I was like, no, I'm asking deeper. And I'm like, I don't have a deeper answer. Last thing I'll say on that, I remember I was at a party. It's completely off the topic of sales, but it's the same idea, which is I go up to this, it's late at night. It's probably 3 a.m. Everyone's been drinking. I don't drink anymore. So I have a glass of wine on occasion, but not like I used to. And And so it's at San Diego that it was somebody's birthday party. They had rented this mansion. Not that I do that often, guys, but this was a thing that was happening. And I'm out on the balcony, and there's this guy, this older 60 something Asian guy, looked like he had done well for himself, but he was still like trying to live his younger life of being at these parties, just trying to give you a profile of the character. And where he's out there smoking on a cigarette, and he's just looking out at the stars, and I think he's thinking deep thoughts. And so I'm like, it's so crazy, the meaning of the universe and all. And I'm like, what do you think it all means? He's takes a biggest drag of the cigarette, and he goes, "You got the wrong guy." And I'm like, what do you mean, man? Come on, look, like, look at the vastness of it all. This is so crazy. I probably smoke some weed.
Yeah.
And he's takes another drag. You definitely got the wrong guy. And I'm just like, and that's just, some people just are not thinking that deep.
They're
And
not
I
wired for
think
that.
that's just the truth.
Yep. So true.
So what do you do in that situation? It's like, maybe the person just isn't a deep thinker. I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing in terms of sales. Generally for enterprise, I would like them to be a little bit more analytical. But like, how would you treat that situation if you found somebody giving you generic responses?
Yeah, it's probably not a fit. One of the critical thinking skills is one of the things that the assessment tests for. And so I'm not nice about it. I affectionately say, yeah, I need somebody who doesn't want to check their brain at the door. So I'm like, again, there are companies out there, right? If you need everything buttoned down, if you need the dress code, you need the script to be down to the last letter, you need to know you need the 52-page handbook. Probably not the world that I live in, but there are plenty of companies out there, enterprise Fortune 500 companies that have it all dialed in like that. I think that probably the question that frustrates me the most that I get shitty answers for is I say, take money off the table, because assuming that you're here today because money plays some factor in your life. But what are the real motivators for you? What will success look like for you? And when I get generic answers to that, like the difference between, again, like what I've been getting recently, I've really been pleased by. I've gotten a lot of, I want to buy, again, particularly for that millennial and Gen Z generation who thinks that buying a home is out of reach. They're like, I want to own a home. I want to start a family. I want to be able to pay off school debts. That's real stuff, right? Sometimes I'm talking to first generation Americans and they say, I want to have a better life for my parents. They sacrificed, they came over as an immigrant, and I want to make sure that they don't feel like that was all for naught. I want to be able to give back. I want to be able to help support my family. There's a lot I've been hearing again in this. I think it really is more this generation. I have a Gen Zer myself, and they are a different breed. I listen to them even when he's playing Xbox with his headphones on. I'm hearing the conversations that are going on, and I'm pretty involved with his friends. And I think they're just more thoughtful. And I think families pretty important to them. Their friend group, like I didn't grow up calling it a friend group, but they're very protective of their friend group. I want to be able, like my son would probably say, I want to be able to have enough money to be able to visit. His friends are now dispersed. His college roommate of 5 years is in DC. He's got a good friend in New York. He has a friend that just moved to LA a few months ago. And he has to be with his people to feel connected. And he instilled the travel bug in him because I used to spend a lot of money on travel and not a lot of money on cars. I was like, I don't care what kind of car I drive, but I want to be able to see the world. I know that there's a bigger life out there, that the bubble I live in isn't just that. So I think really digging deep on that question about what does success look like for you? What is motivation? Like you said, when they don't know and they haven't given any thought, when I say to people, I'm like, I'm not a dream board girl. What do they call it? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. So,
With
yes.
something like that.
I forget. I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Like I don't have a bucket list. I don't whatever, but
Vision board.
vision board. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm not a vision board person. I don't sit down and say, I want to do this before I die. I just what I want to be able to do, more importantly for me, is when an opportunity arises, I want to be able to take advantage of it in the moment, right? It would be great. I play competitive tennis. I would love to go to Wimbledon. I'm not really so interested in the US Open actually, but I think going to Wimbledon would be like just the bomb diggity. But it's not something I'm planning for, but it's something that if the opportunity were to arise, I want to have the finances and the lifestyle to be able to do that, right? Where I can just say, let's go already, right? So I want to be a little more spontaneous but I wouldn't necessarily need to say, like I've owned homes. I'm now a renter. I think home ownership sucks now. I was like, I want to call somebody else when something breaks. I'm tired of fixing stuff. But I think really like in the people who give a really complete answer for that, and I don't think it's blowing smoke. I think the people, to your point, like they're not really lying about that. They really don't know. And so they give the generic, like I think it's an answer they think they should have, but they don't. And so they give a generic answer just because they feel like they have to. But I think that question, if you can really dig into that, tells you a ton about people.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the other screen because I have to jump in a few minutes, just so I'm sending off a Zoom link to somebody that I have to jump to. But I wanted to thank you for being on the podcast, and
Thanks for
we
having me. It was
definitely
such a
need a
great
part two.
conversation.
We need a part two.
Good.
Again, I'm going to plug your book here because I enjoyed reading a few passages. So you can see, everyone, it's Selling Your Way In. It's a very cool cover.
Thank
And
you.
so, Kristie Jones, where can everyone find you online?
I would love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would love for you to send me a note and tell me about your takeaway from today. I always am interested in what nuggets people took away and was like, hey, that changed something for me. And then you can get the book anywhere that you buy books, or you can go to sellingyourwayin.com and it'll point you in the right direction. So, Benjamin, it's been a pleasure. You and I have a lot of things in common.
Yeah, 100%. Who should read your book? Who's your ideal customer profile for the book?
I think people who either know that who are already in sales, but have been struggling to find that right fit company or that right fit industry or situation, who feel like, hey, like I'm getting into the 60 or 70%, but I'm not getting as far as I think I should. And people who are considering a career in sales, because what I would love to do is take those first timers and help them not screw up the first job. Because like, remember, I told you, I don't want them to quit on me. If if they're really built for this, I don't want them to have a really bad first experience and then write off sales as a profession. Yeah, I think there's a PS. I think even if you're not in sales, there's a lot of life lessons in here. This book is pretty personal. Talks a lot about my upbringing and the things that I was taught, value systems and other things. So I think there's a lot of things in there for people who even might not even consider a career in sales.
And how do people get these cool cards?
You can, if you link in with me and you send me a note, you may ask for Christieism cards and I will get them shipped off to you.
Anyone listening who cannot see, I have these cool cards that I got sent, and very cool branding for Kristie. They're called Christieisms, so they're little phrases like "a player privilege," "farmers want to raise the baby." So pretty cool stuff. I actually enjoyed a few of them,
Awesome.
and they are now on my bookshelf. So I love little physical objects to send on the branding side. I totally need to do more of that. So I'm so 100% digital. Thanks, everyone. This has been the Next Gen Sales Leader Podcast. We will see you guys on the next episode, and we are signing out.
Thank you.